Hey guys, it's Conf Hollywood Studios here, and today we're going to be talking a little more about Six Flags in DC. If you didn't see the first video, go check it out. It pretty much discusses whether or not Medusa was always the plan, meaning was Bizarro originally going to get a DC retheme or was Medusa always the plan? Go check out that video first before you check out this one, because this is sort of a continuation of that video. So, obviously, Six Flags chose to go with Medusa for Bizarro's retheme at Great Adventure. So, does that have deeper connotations for the rest of the Six Flags chain? And if it does, what does it mean for the future of the rides at the parks? First, let's take a look at what Six Flags is adding to their parks in 2022. There really is only 2 rides, as far as I know, being added, at least significant rides. There are 2 coasters going to Six Flags Fiesta Texas and Six Flags Magic Mountain. One of them is DC themed, which is Wonder Woman Flight of Courage going to Six Flags Magic Mountain, and the other is not DC themed, which is Dr. Diabolical's Cliffhanger going to Six Flags Fiesta Texas. Now, I think it's safe to assume that these 2 additions were probably planned a while ago, and they likely were not going to be changed with the new CEO. I would imagine that these were decided to be made during Mike Spanos' reign, or maybe even Jim Reed Anderson's reign over the company, and it was probably safe to assume that at least the rides were definitely decided before there was any CEO changes. As for the themes though, I definitely think Six Flags Magic Mountain's coaster had a Wonder Woman theme from the start. Dr. Diabolical's Cliffhanger though, I have a feeling that Jeffrey Siebert might have had some input on that, because Six Flags loved to theme everything to DC if they could, and this not being themed to DC was definitely a bit of a surprise, so I have a feeling that he might have had something to do with that. Of course, there are other rides opening like Sidewinder Safari and Aquaman Powerwave, but those are carryovers from 2020, and those were not decided by Mike Spanos or Soleil Bazol. Those were probably Jim Reed Anderson era additions, so I doubt that these 2 had anything to do with those. Now, thinking ahead, is Six Flags going to continue theming their rides to DC, or are they trying to get away with it? I think Medusa is probably the best example of this, as it's really almost serving as a bit of a turning point if they decide to go down this path. I mean, the fact that Great Adventure changed the theme of a DC ride to something original is honestly very surprising, and I could see them continuing down this route, especially if Soleil Bazol is trying to make the parks a much more high quality experience. I'm not saying that DC themes degrade the experience at Six Flags parks. When they're done well, like a ride like Justice League Battle for Metropolis, it really does elevate the experience. But the fact of the matter is that pretty much every Six Flags DC ride, with the exception of the dark rides, really do not get themed that well at all. There's maybe a little bit of theming at the entrance and in the queue, but really nothing else. It's certainly nowhere near the level of other parks. Obviously, I'm not expecting them to do Universal level theming, but even SeaWorld can definitely do a bit of a better job theming some of their attractions than Six Flags does. That is especially true with the DC themes. I definitely think that if they do want to keep doing DC themes, they gotta first start by changing some of the queues up, because some queues on these DC rides, they're a bit strange, especially Batman. I'm not really sure what the theme is supposed to be for that at this point. It's very loose and very just not maintained, so it's very hard to tell what that theme is. But if they were able to renovate that queue and give it a more distinct theme and queue, I think that would definitely be a lot better. But let's say Six Flags doesn't want to go down this route, and instead they want to have more unique, different, cool rides with different themes. Could they revert their DC themes back to original rides, or will they keep the DC theming? Well, I think it depends park by park, of course. If you look at a park like Great Adventure, for example, the DC rides there are way too spread apart, and I think they definitely should focus on trying to get all the DC themed rides into one area. So obviously that would be over by Batman and Justice League. That whole area is pretty much themed to DC already, but they already have quite a few other rides not in that area that are themed to DC. Before Medusa's retheme, they had Bizarro all the way in the back of the park. They have Superman and Green Lantern right on the boardwalk. They have Joker and Harley Quinn on the lakefront. Everything's kind of spread out, and it's a bit weird, especially with Joker. You'd think Joker would be right next to Batman, and you would have thought that Bizarro would be right next to Superman, but I guess not. So I definitely think that if they're going to try to get rid of DC themes, I don't think they'd fully get rid of them. I think instead they try to congregate them all into one area of the park. There's other parks that do this really well, especially Six Flags Over Texas. They have quite a few DC themed attractions, but pretty much all of them are right next to each other, all in that Gotham City area, and it works really well because everything themed to Batman is right there. Of course, there's a couple exceptions, like Superman's not really in Gotham City, it's a little further apart, but either way, having all your DC themed rides in one area really helps organize the park and make it look better, especially because you can kind of tie the theming in for that area all together. I think it looks a lot better overall. While we are on the topic of IPs at Six Flags parks, we should probably talk about Looney Tunes, because if you ask me, it seems like they're trying to push Looney Tunes out of the parks. Looney Tunes is a very old brand, and recently it really hasn't been doing too much. I mean, you had Space Jam, but that's about it. There's not really like a mainline popular Looney Tunes cartoon going on right now, and most kids don't know who the Looney Tunes are. I mean, maybe they know from their parents telling them, but in terms of watching the show, they're pretty unheard of for kids these days. So we can see at Great Adventure that they rethemed one of their Looney Tunes areas to a more generic standard theme, which is Junior Thrill Seekers. Could this also be a trend that might happen across the chain? Well, it depends, park by park, as I said before. At Great Adventure, they have one Looney Tunes themed area now, which is Bugs Bunny National Park, and that is not a very big kids area at all. So you can almost say that the Looney Tunes are pretty much gone from Great Adventure, with the exception of the walk-around characters, which are out there quite a bit. I mean, if you look at other parks, they've recently had like Bugs Bunny Boomtown and other really nice kids areas added to those parks. So I definitely think that they're not going to get rid of areas like that, because they probably poured quite a bit of money and put a lot of effort into those areas to make them look good. And I think that from now on, when they're redoing kids areas, they're probably just going to stick for an original theme like Junior Thrill Seekers, like Timber Town, which is at Frontier City. I think they're probably going to try to avoid going for the Looney Tunes route, because in the end, it's really not that profitable, because Looney Tunes is not the most well-known brand anymore, and overall, I think they're probably better springing for a more original theme. So the final verdict, is Six Flags done with DC and, by extension, Looney Tunes? I'm going to say no, but I think they're trying to lessen their presence at the parks. We see this with Medusa, and we also saw it with Junior Thrill Seekers cutting out Looney Tunes from the side of the park, but overall, I do think they're going to try to keep some form of a DC presence, especially now that DC is kind of having a bit of a revitalization in terms of movies. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys are into movies the way I am, but I recently saw The Batman. It was an incredible film, and DC's Peacemaker on HBO Max was also a really great series. So hopefully DC can kind of repair their film image, because Justice League kind of destroyed that. So hopefully they can try to revitalize their film image to the general public, and maybe Six Flags will be more inclined to add more DC attractions to the parks. But I think under the leadership of Salim Bazol, they're more focused on making the parks higher quality, which in his mind could mean getting rid of DC themed attractions. Of course, let me know what you guys think in the comments below, if you agree that Six Flags is moving away from DC and Looney Tunes theming, or if you think that this is just a fluke and that they're going to keep theming rides to DC and Looney Tunes. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I'm Colin from Hollywood Studios, and I'll see you all in the next video.